Good morning and welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm your host, Justine Reichman. With me today is Caryl and Ken. They are the co-founders of Lotus Foods, and they're joining us today from the Adirondacks. And I'm excited to have you guys here. Welcome, Caryl. Welcome, Ken.
Thanks, Justine. We're excited to be with you today, too.
Thanks for having us.
It's my pleasure. So for those not familiar with Lotus Foods, because as the co-founders of Lotus Foods, we're excited to hear your story and a little bit about that. But at first, if you would, just tell us, what is Lotus Foods?
Lotus Foods is a organic heirloom rice company that was started in 1995 to actually promote rice biodiversity, working with smallholder farmers from around the world who are actually growing rice more sustainably and giving them access to a global marketplace at a fair trade price.
Wow. So what inspired you guys to start this business to be able to make that available and accessible?
Well, many years ago, back in 1993, we took a market research trip to China looking for a business idea. And of course, while you travel, you need to eat. And we just discovered that there was a treasure trove of heirloom varieties of rice that pretty much did not exist in the West because of the forces of agribusiness kind of limited what people could buy in stores. And so that was the one out of, say, 90 ideas that we took back with us after 2 months of traveling. And having just relocated to the Bay Area, arguably one of the nation's food type of meccas, we thought this black rice that we discovered in China would really be successful. And so we started introducing it to high-end chefs in the Bay Area. And that gave us the indication that perhaps this is a good idea.
Wow, it's a great place to start. But I'm curious, as you're building this business and as you come up with all these 90 ideas, and really all you need is one, right? Is this something that you guys had done before? Were you serial entrepreneurs, or is this your first time at the wheel as an entrepreneur?
This was the first time. So we were actually a young couple, just together for 3 years, and we started creating these house parties together. We made a jazz club in Hartford, Connecticut, and we just kind of like had a lot of fun and did really work well together. So we just basically thought, let's go into business together, which is crazy, but that's what we did. And then we needed to find, a purposeful, something purposeful to do. And so when we discovered the rice and also the lack of biodiversity, as Ken said, and accessibility and the plight of the small farmer and all these incredible heirloom varieties that could potentially go extinct, we just kind of found our niche. And so we became the pioneers really in pigmented rice. We were the first ones to introduce to the US the black rice that we trademarked forbidden rice. And then there was a really beautiful heirloom variety of red rice from the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan. That was still to this day my very favorite rice in the world.
And I'll just
Is that your favorite rice too?
I'll just have to add, I did have experience eating rice every day growing up in a Chinese American family. But that certainly is not the credentials for starting a business.
No, but it does talk to sort of our experiences in life and how we come to the things that we ultimately do, right? It's based on passion, it's based on experiences, it's based on a void that we see.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
I'll have to say also, though, when we told him, my dad, after putting 5 kids through college, and I said, hey, Caryl and I are starting a business and it's rice. And all he could think of was the 28 years of restaurant business he was in, where some guy would come lugging a 100-pound bag of rice into the restaurant and dump it on a big pile of other 100-pound bags of rice. And I think he didn't understand then, but I think before he passed, he understood this was a totally different thing. So that was a good thing.
it's funny that you say that, because I equally had the same challenge with my dad. When I started a long time ago, I owned a gaming company, and My dad's like, what is this? It's like a dollhouse. He like did not understand at all what I did. And then like a few years later, he figures, oh, a virtual world? He's starting to hear about it. He knows about it. Now he gets it. Well, I don't do that anymore. But my point is, it's oftentimes that parents, they don't see it initially, but when it comes to fruition and you have something to show them, all of a sudden it comes to light with the excitement and the passion and the joy and the pride for what you've created.
Yeah, I'll say I remember talking to someone about this, thinking that we could start a rice business and work with high-end chefs. And this person who I took to lunch to pick their brain said, Ken, that's a crazy idea. You're like nobody, and you're going to go see high-end chefs who are like the top of the pile. And but that just goes to show, when you want to do something different, there'll be 1,000 people to tell you you can't do that.
Yeah, but we were, after we had our, first of all, the forbidden rice became forbidden to us for 2 years. We couldn't find, how to work in China to export it. But once we did get it here, chefs like Roland Passot and Thomas Keller and Alice Waters, they all wanted to meet with us and to taste it, because who wouldn't want to add another colorful and yet delicious and nutritious rice to their palate and to their, to the center of the plate, which is also one of the things that we really felt we have accomplished, is that we put rice to be the center of the plate instead of just a carbohydrate or starch, 2 ounces on the side of a plate.
So I'm curious, because when you were talking about this, you were talking about all the challenges that were around the farmers and et cetera, and the biodiversity. So why is that so meaningful to you? And why was that sort of something you chose to build on and work to create a solution around?
Well, for me, right livelihood is really, really important. What's happening also in the farming community in the last 25 years is something that we call the feminization of agriculture. And so many of the men, males, have to leave the farm and go to the city to make income, to make livelihood for the families. And so it basically leaves the women to not only do the child rearing and the households and the kitchen gardens and all that, but actually the farming. So a lot of the backbreaking work of rice farming actually went to the women. And so in 2007, Olivia Vent from Cornell University introduced us to something called the system of rice intensification that we market as more crop per drop, but it was a new methodology, an agroecological methodology for changing how rice is grown that actually saved women's labor. It actually saved seeds. It saved 50% water. So we learned very quickly that just by changing how rice is grown, we could actually have social, environmental, and economic impacts, which is really what really got us excited and changed the trajectory of Lotus Foods as well.
That would get me excited too. And I'd be curious to even go a step further and say, okay, well, we saw the impact back then and we continue to see the impact. What impact do you hope to see, going forward?
Well, it's interesting. I'll just say, when we first started, we were on that kind of a biodiversity journey, exploration, discovering new. They were actually ancient varieties, but they were new for who would be our customers. And so, from there, the arc of our evolution was that we would work with farmers to move them from conventional practices to organic. And then, when Caryl mentioned Olivia Vent introducing this new way of growing rice, which was a kind of a less is more paradigm, we realized it was that kind of a light bulb moment where we said, oh, it's not good enough just to be organic, where you don't use a lot of chemicals in the field, synthetic fertilizers and that type of thing. But, there's issues about water, like, because rice uses a tremendous amount of water in flooded fields. And when you can grow rice without flooding the fields in an aerobic environment, you mitigate methane emissions. And of course, methane is a real nasty greenhouse gas. It's like 25 times more deleterious than CO2. And it also has a short half-life. And when it dies off, it turns into CO2, which is around for another 100 years. So we've realized, well, there's more to this ecosystem, that it really is a system. And when we have bad practices, it's not only bad for farmers who, because they can't grow as much in flooded fields because there aren't any crops that are designed to be
Mhm.
grown in flooded fields. It's just they learn to survive. And then, of course, if there's methane emissions and there's more backbreaking work. So it came to us as something that, was like a moral imperative that we need to
Mhm.
kind of improve these systems instead of just going by the same old way that we've been doing things, which is kind of getting us to where we are.
From that evolution came the next evolution, which was regenerative organic certification. So again, as Ken said, we went from conventional rice farming to organic rice farming. Then when we learned from Dr. Bronner's and Rodale about regenerative organic certification being, going beyond organic, we also then realized we have to evolve as well. So we actually became the first rice in the world to be rock certified. And this is with our organic basmati rice out of India. And also we were fortunate to get the highest standard of gold status as well. So, when we first were asked to become a pilot project with the rock standard, we were kind of on the fence, because we said, wow, do we need another bug on our label? Because it's already with non-GMO project verification and whole grain council and gluten-free. It gets very confusing for the
Organic, fair
consumer.
trade.
Organic, fair trade. But when we also knew that out of the 17 pilot projects, there were only about 4 or 5 of us who were working outside of the US. So we knew we needed to be the voice of the smallholder farmer living in a developing country, because what might be $100 soil test to an American farmer is still expensive, but for a small farmer in India, it could potentially be prohibitive. And that they couldn't afford that 3 or 4 times a year. So we wanted to be the voice of the smallholder farmer. Plus, we knew that system of rice intensification, this agroecological methodology that we were committed to, was inherently regenerative, but this was a way to prove so and to satisfy that third party standard. So we decided to do it, and we're now totally committed to rock as well, and eventually changing our supply chain over to rock certification as well.
And Carol mentions, smallholder farmers. And so one might think that most food is produced by big ag, but it's not. Probably depends on whose numbers you're looking at. About 70% of all food is produced by smallholders. And so it's essential that we can create the type of circumstances where smallholders can thrive instead of, like Carol mentioned, men have left the farms to go to cities to find other forms of employment because farming is just not happening. It's not sustainable for so many people. And in terms of rice, more people derive their livelihood from rice than anything else that human beings do on planet Earth. And so it's a place that, although we named it Lotus Foods, we are committed to rice and the evolution of rice that helps people and planet, because it's so impactful. More than half the world derive most of their caloric intake from rice. And it's yet in flooded fields, it's the third largest emitter of methane, right behind fossil fuel extraction is number 1 and cows is number 2, and flooded rice fields is number 3. So it's a great way to feel like we can, with our company and what we've been able to start, to feel like we can really do something of value in the world. And so it's our goal to catalyze a change in how rice is grown. Not that we'll deliver the whole message, but we think
Right.
getting it started is kind of create that tipping point will be really important.
What role does education play in this for you?
Huge amount. And still today, I mean, that's actually our number one job and challenge, is to educate the consumer, educate the retailer, the distributor, the broker, our team, everybody. Yeah, and ourselves. I mean, it's
Right.
been a constant journey of education for ourselves as well. We knew none of this going into this 30 plus years ago.
And so when you are educating people and you are bringing this up, what are some of the greatest misnomers that people think or challenges that you come across that you really have to sort of educate people on and re-inform them maybe?
I think it's interesting when I talk about that you don't have to flood a rice field. Everyone's like, "That's how rice is grown, isn't it?" I mean, everyone's seen all those beautiful pictures of rice paddies. Um,
I think most people don't understand, as Ken said, that rice learned to survive in water. It doesn't thrive in water. So, like this year, everybody knows that when you flood your roots of a vegetable, so like in the vegetable garden this summer in the Adirondacks, we've had a very, very rainy summer. And so there were times where some of my string beans and onions were underwater and they rotted
Yeah.
and they can't survive in water. But rice learned how to survive in water. It doesn't thrive in water. So that, that's one major hurdle. I think people don't understand about the methane emissions. They don't really understand about how rice impacts women. I mean, you see these photos of women who are bent over in rice fields, and they can't actually straighten up. And the pain points in growing rice, if you have to sit in a flooded field, sorting rice seedlings out for 8 hours a day. You've got malaria disease vector. You've got infections from water. It's just not. It's not pleasant. And so, by creating a tool that our farmers use to actually mitigate the weeds, it also creates aeration. And but they're standing up. So we have this, iconic photo of a woman pushing this rotary weeder through the fields while they're standing up. And it's such a fun tool that the men want to use it as well, which is great. And it just also shows we've learned that the women who are, doing all this farming become true leaders in their community and true people who basically pass it on to their neighbor and basically say, hey, I can help you, have a better life as well. And just by changing how you grow this rice. So it's a very grassroots movement as well, from one rice farmer to the other.
Sounds like it's real community driven too.
Very much so.
yeah, it's farmer to farmer type of learning that happens. But I just wanted to point out also there's a big misunderstanding in terms of arsenic in rice. It's a
Mhm.
concern because I think it was a Consumer Reports article that tested a bunch of baby food and found high levels of arsenic, and I traced it to rice syrup. And so there's a misconception, I think, that rice has a problem with arsenic, and actually, it's rice doesn't have a problem so much as we as human beings have polluted the earth. So whether it's over industrialization, which has polluted that soil, or whether it's mining activity, or some way that the soil gets infected with arsenic, and then when you flood a field, that acts as a way to transmit the arsenic from the ground into the rice plant.
Wow.
And so if you've got polluted soil to start with, and I bet if you test a whole bunch of other foods, you'll find other heavy metals in there that are part of the, you know, it's part of what's on the earth. It's in the air, it's in the water. But I think it's something of concern by people, but it's not necessarily that it's inherent to rice.
Right. And so, what is the role that you think regenerative, or you believe regenerative agriculture plays in sort of dealing with and addressing some of those issues?
Well, I think Carol touched on it when she talked about this SRI, system of rice intensification, that which we market as more crop per drop. This idea of whether we wanted to be rock certified. But I think because there is certification, there's organic certification, there's fair trade certification involved with being a regenerative organic certified product. And so with all that scrutiny, we felt like if we could be rock certified, we could show that SRI, or more crop per drop, is inherently regenerative, because it's looking at the whole system. It's improving soil health, increasing yields, minimizing women's labor, mitigating methane emissions. So, regenerative, simply just could be, because I think there's a lot of confusion, like, what is regenerative? Everybody's saying regenerative. So I think there's no standing still. You're moving forward or you're moving backwards. And to regenerate is to actually restore or bring to health or bring to life the living systems that sustain us. And so, it's
Well, for me, the tenet of regenerative is really based on soil. And so, but there's also two important benchmarks that we really resonate with rock. And that, first of all, is it has to be organic. Because if you're actually putting chemicals in your soil, then you're not, we don't think we're moving beyond where we need to be. So organic is really, to us, a very important benchmark premise. And then fair trade is also important too. And that's one of the things that we really like about rock, and that those are the two tenets that are a must-have before you can go further. And, crop rotation is really important. Keeping your soil covered is really important. But, it's really about improving the soil, because when you improve the nutrients in your soil, then you're going to get that uptake of those micronutrients into the food itself. So they're basically saying that your food in organic and in regenerative actually is more nutritious, because you're getting, if your soil is nutritious, all those micronutrients are being now born into your food itself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's oftentimes questions about organic and regenerative, and there's so many different, I think, lenses that people look through when they're doing that, right? Whether it's around upcycling or a soil, or, from the farmer's perspective, from the consumer's perspective, how people deal with things in the end. So I appreciate you guys sharing that, because I think that the more we can hear from different people what that means, the more people can, take it to them, make it their own too, using those tenets from within that, and do what I always like to make things accessible for people so that they can do. They don't have to do everything, but if something that you're saying resonates with them and they feel like it's easy for them to do, they can do it. If it seems so difficult and there's so many things that they have to do, oftentimes it can be overwhelming. So for me, it's super important. I love to be able to share that through this platform for our guests.
Yeah, and I think to simplify it, I remember we went to a conference, and the phrase was, "What we do to the land, we do to the people." And so this, I think, speaks to what Caryl was talking about in terms of soil, the importance of it. And look what happens when we pollute the soil, whether it's arsenic or
Right.
dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico, or, I mean, just name name these negative effects as a result of what we've done to our own land. Somehow people expect that their food should be pristine, but we haven't been pristine to the planet. And so
Right.
how do you separate the two?
Yeah. Yeah. I often say it's better for me, better for you, better for the planet whenever I'm thinking about these things. And if we could all sort of think about it like that, it might change the way we do things, the way we think about things, how we leverage different things, and just maybe live our lives a little bit differently without having to do everything. Because I do see that the idea of having to do everything could be really overwhelming.
No, I think as long as people really try to do as much as possible, if everybody did a little bit, we'd be all in a lot better shape.
I totally agree. So I want to go back a little bit to when you guys started this company, to share a little bit about your journey, because we have a lot of different founders that often tune in and want to hear what that journey was like for you. So in the beginning, when we talk about you guys came together, you did your research, and you're building out this company, were you guys self-funded? And were you hustling and doing two different jobs? Was this a side hustle? What was that journey like? How did it start out for you guys?
Well, when we started, when we moved from Connecticut to California to start a Pacific Rim business, well, we figured be good to be in the Pacific Rim if we're going to have a Pacific Rim business. And so Carol took a job at UC Berkeley and did that job for 7 years while we started Lotus Foods. And so we didn't have any money basically. It's a bootstrap company. And I wish I still had it, but I have about, I don't know, a big jar of chopped up credit cards. And I think I used to manage about 20 or 30 of those at once. And I'd like get 5,000 from this card at 0% interest. And when the time ran out, I would roll it over to another card because, no banks were going to bank a small startup food company. It's like too risky for them. And so we were really scrappy, and we still have retained some of that scrappiness even today, although it's not really the same circumstances. But that's how we got started. And I used to deliver rice to retail stores and to chefs, and in the stores I would go grab the price gun and I would price all my stuff. I would merchandise it on the shelf. And then I put up a shelf talker, and then I go in my car and I get the demo table and the tablecloth and the rice cookers, and then I do demos and talk about educating people. I mean, that's the way to put it in their mouths, and they would like, wow, that's not rice like I know it. And then you start talking about the health benefits and where it comes from, and it was, because nobody knew about these things like Bhutanese red rice or black rice from China, forbidden rice, and so that it was a lot of that going on, and it took us a long, long time to really kind of lay the foundation. But yeah, it's
And then I think it was in 2007 we did our first angel investor pitch
Were
in
you
with
still working at that time at UC Berkeley?
no, I stopped in 2000.
Okay.
So I stopped working in 2000 and joined Lotus Foods full time.
So what happened there that allowed you to make that leap?
I guess we were making some money, and we could afford for me to lose, to stop working, and that was great because we were growing and we needed the full-time body here instead of the half-time, and so that was great. And then and I remember in 2007 that's when we decided you really need cash to really grow, to market the business. I think we were not spending any money on marketing and things like that, except for us doing demos. And so I remember when we were in Investor Circle, that's when we heard about the 3 Ps that we were already, doing, planet, profit, people. And then I always added the 4th, purpose. And we didn't know that there was, something called those 3 Ps. We were just doing it. And then we got our first angel investor, I think soon after that. And the only thing that I really would like to share with your audience is that how important it is to really carefully choose your investment partners. It's like another marriage, and you really have to know who you're taking money from. And we were very fortunate in that respect for over the 30 years.
Are there any questions that you might share with our listeners that they should consider asking when they're going to take investment?
Well, I think asking the questions to ensure whether you're mission aligned or not. People in the due diligence, if all they're asking is the financial returns and what they're going to get out of it, and they're not really interested in what you're actually doing, then that it's just a transaction. Right. It's not really being a part of the growth of the company. And so it's not an easy enterprise, especially when companies really need the money and you don't have a lot to choose from. But it could also be the end game for you, in that with the wrong investors, you can potentially lose your company.
And so now you took investment in what year was that?
I think it was 2008 or 9.
Okay, so
and
now
then,
you've had
and then we hadn't taken an investment in over 12 years.
Right.
Well, I think it was actually like '07 before the '08 economic crash, because this investor, actually, we'd been asking him for a while, and it wasn't until this whole introduction of SRI, the system of rice intensification, that was really interesting to this investor, because it was a kind of a game changer for him. And so that's when he came in and provided us with the capital. And then '08 hit, the subprime mortgage debacle, where the whole international economic system nearly crashed. And so then, to the point about who you take money from, not just investment on the equity side, but on the lending side in terms of debt. We had
Mhm.
debt from several holders of that gave us money, and some of them were getting a little antsy because the financials weren't doing that well in 2008 because of the world crisis, and the we had we were banking with a green bank in San Francisco. It was called New Resource Bank at the time, and they were telling the other lenders, like, hey, just cool it, let these guys have a moment to let their plan go to work. And they had first dibs on any, if they were going to sell off the assets of the company, and they were doing all that kind of analysis. And
Mhm.
so that bought us the time to actually, because we had the investment money and we did what we said we would do in terms of rebranding the company and the packaging and the messaging and the promotions and stuff like that. And that the bank saying, hey, everybody, let's just settle down and give them time to work it out. And then we actually did dig ourselves out of that hole. And if that didn't happen, then we wouldn't have gotten ever to this point where we have all these added value products with a whole line of noodle products that are very successful for us now. But that would have never happened if they called the line and we would have
Right.
just sold off the business. So
So, what would you tell new entrepreneurs that are building a new CPG company or new food company um, about your experience that they maybe can have some takeaways
I think it's
from?
interesting because I think because of the what we were trying to do, I think it set us apart. That's why that investor first came on board. So if you don't really have a good value proposition in terms of why an investor would be interested, they're probably not going to be interested. But I can only speak for ourselves. Is somehow through this journey, which we never envisioned where we would be now. It certainly wasn't a straight line. It was this kind of meandering path. But I think it's because we were out there and experiencing things and taking ideas in and
Making
yeah.
connections, making and building relationships. I mean,
Mhm.
we have a supply chain partner in China who was with us from the very beginning. That's been over 25 years. And those kind of relationships and trust building and is that you can't put a value to that. That's just it's just so valuable. But I just think you have to find investors who are willing to give you the time and the resources to do what you've set out to do, because it takes time. And
Yeah.
people think, to try to do this in 5 to 7 years is not is that's tough, and it depends upon the economic environment. Like look where we are today. We're just coming out of COVID, and it's a tough environment out there right now.
Yeah, it is. And it's a lot of people are having a lot of challenges. So let's talk about COVID for a minute. How did that impact your journey and what was going on with Lotus Foods and the packaged foods that
Yeah,
you have?
no, actually, for the what it so many things happened, for Lotus Foods and during COVID. The thing that it actually it was we were very fortunate in that rice is a staple. So
Right.
there was a tremendous need for rice, and our suppliers could fulfill that need where others couldn't. And so we actually doubled our revenue in that period of time, and with the same staff. I think it was really tough on the staff because, first of all, we were working all remotely,
Right.
and we were fulfilling, pipelines that we've never filled before. And so it was very gratifying, but it was really, it was tough. And, we mainly are now continuing to work remotely. That's what gave Ken and I an opportunity to move from California to the Adirondacks. But I think we lose a lot in not being, it's so much more challenging keeping the culture of an organization like ours, which was pretty tight, with working remotely. So I think that's something our new CEO, we actually stepped down as CEOs last July, and we brought in Andrew Burke, who was our first C-suite hire 5 years ago. We brought him in as president COO for the first 4 years, and he proved to be such an asset that we made him CEO. And so, that's something that he's grappling with now, is how do we work the next years trying to continue our culture and maybe start bringing people back to the office.
So I'm curious, and I know we got to wrap this up soon, but as you look forward and you look, 3, 5, 10 years, are we going to see any other products you think that you will make with rice?
Oh, you're going to see a lot of new products. Absolutely. We're actually working on a 5-year pipeline right now of innovation. So we took our first investment in over 12 years this past spring. And that investment is really to grow the company in new ways that we haven't been able to do before. So we're really, really excited, actually, for the next 30 years.
Amazing. Amazing. So is there any products that maybe you could share, or is it too premature?
It's too premature. It will definitely be rice-based and delicious and nutritious, and something that will really be a solution for the consumer in how to feed themselves and their family nutritious and delicious foods.
Awesome. Caryl, thank you guys so much for joining me today on the podcast. I really appreciate it. If folks wanted to connect with you because they love what you're doing, what would be the best way for them to connect with you?
Through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great platform, a professional platform that, we really try to keep up to date. So I think that's one of the best ways to contact us.
And if people are interested in getting product?
On the Lotus Foods website, we often have a lot of promotions on the website as well. And of course, in stores, go visit your natural food stores and your independent stores, and really use your pocketbook to shop your values too. So, we really do appreciate all our consumers who really get what we're trying to do.
And Justine,
Thank you, guys. Sorry, Ken.
Just to go back on advice for people that are just looking for how to move forward or how to discover that next thing. I just think remaining curious, that was our curiosity in that market research trip a long time ago to discover heirloom varieties of rice. And it's the same curiosity that's kind of gotten us to evolve the way we have, staying open and asking the right questions. And if you ask the right questions, then hopefully you can find the right answers.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining me today.
Lovely, Justine. Thank you.